We have to have a strong military. And we cannot look at the military and say that this little 19.6, 19.7% of our budget is going to be the bill payer. While this other 62%, the net interest on our debt, Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, we won't touch it because we have politicians up here that don't have the courage to stand up and tell the American people what needs to be said. The number one responsibility of the federal government is to provide for the common defense. When you read the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, the majority of the responsibilities and the tasks given to Congress does not have to do with giving out food stamps. It has to do with protecting the American people. But unfortunately, if you go back and look at food stamp spending from 2002 to where we are today, we've gone from $20.6 billion to $75.8 billion a year on food stamp expenditures. And the Farm Bill that came out of the Senate wants to take food stamp expenditures per year to $80 billion. But yet we're going to turn over to our men and women in uniform and say, you're not worth the investment to keeping us safe and secure. That's reprehensible. And that's why we have to have men and women who have been on the tactical end, on the battlefield, to come up and make the right type of strategic level decisions up here in Washington, D.C. The world is more Machiavellian than it is Kantian. And with that being said, what are your questions?
I know they want to ask you some questions, and I'm going to use the platform here to ask the first one. I was so glad to hear you use the word military superiority. It's not just being strong, it's being superior. And those words used to be in the Republican National Platform, but they're not now. Will you help me put those words back in the Republican platform by telling your delegates what to do?
Well, absolutely right. And there's a little known fact that a lot of people aren't paying attention to. If we're not careful, this could be the first election cycle in the United States of America where we have sitting president and vice president and candidate for president and vice president that have never served in the military. I believe this is the first time in, I think, 77 years. How will you be able to articulate, as we said, the preeminent responsibility of national security, military superiority? And that's not just about, bullets and ammunition and guns. It's about the full spectrum of military operations, information operation dominance, intelligence dominance, things of that nature. We've got to have people that have served in the military. And once upon a time, and Phyllis, I'm sure you well know this, you had 75 to 80% of the members of Congress had served in the military. And now I think we're down to less than 12%. That has a reflection on the priorities of this country.
Question?
Congressman, you alluded to the chaotic situation that realization of the sequester would have on our nation. In your personal opinion, how do we balance maintaining our strength and our national budget?
Well, I think, once again, you have to go back and look at what are the right and proper constitutional roles and responsibilities of the federal government. And, I disagree with the president when he says that people are out there, creating businesses and running businesses and having successful. That's not due to their own success. That's due to government success. I mean, when you start to get to that point, then what you're, really saying is that we own you and we own your resources. We have got to unleash the individual, indomitable, entrepreneurial spirit of the American citizen. America is about individual industrialism, and from the individual you get investment, ingenuity, and innovation. Now, the federal government should be, really focused on the things that the individual cannot provide for themselves and private sector organizations cannot provide. And when you start to look at it in that perspective, then you really understand what are the lanes of responsibility of the federal government. Like I said, go to Article 1, Section 8, and look at the tasks and responsibilities for Congress. And that gives you a clear insight into what we're supposed to be doing. Federal government in and of itself has gotten too big. Way too big. It has become a bureaucratic nanny state. And in it being a bureaucratic nanny state, then we're starting to get away from the things that are necessary for the function of this government. And how many people here have read Alexis de Tocqueville's book, Democracy in America? Okay, if you read Democracy in America, it says it very clearly. It talks about, when Congress gets to the point where it can bribe the public by using the public's treasury, guess what you get? This is what you have, and that's why you have this exorbitant growth of the federal government, because we're promising more and more largesse to the American people. Now, how did that work out for Greece or Portugal or Italy or Ireland or Spain? You know, I know we're on C-SPAN right now, so this is the question you should always pose to liberals. Where has what you believe in ever been successful in the world?
Where are those traveling mics? We'd like the questions to be on the mic. Who's got a mic and a question?
Wendy, George Washington University. Thank you for being here.
That's an honor.
Congressman. Could you give us some insights? There was previous months and I believe it was last year, President Obama had met with major Jewish leaders behind closed doors at the White House. Could you give us some insights as far as like what you think is whether Obama's support for Israel is one of the biggest myths? Thank you very much.
Well, I don't speculate, or I don't get into the subjective. I ask you this. As the President of the United States of America, how many times has he been to Israel? Okay, how many times has he been to give major speeches in Islamic countries? Turkey and Cairo. Okay, and you know, I think that you see what the ramifications thereof. So that's what I look at, your actions. And those actions have not lent us to believe that Israel is really and truthfully our greatest ally. You know, there's some issues about how did the fact that Israel was looking to have launch bases in Azerbaijan, how did that information all of a sudden get leaked out? The fact that, you know, they need, you know, the intelligence sharing, the bunker buster munitions, aerial refueling, airspace clearance. I mean, those are the type of things that has to happen. And I think that right now, once again, we're not showing that strong support of Israel, so therefore the other actors in that neighborhood are starting to rise up against them.
Thank you, Congressman, for being here. My name is Molly from Ohio State. My question is with Syria. Some are saying that our involvement or lack of involvement at all is showing that we don't really have power or influence in the Middle East. So my question to you is, what do you see our future in Syria, and what is there that we can possibly do? What are the thoughts?
Well, I will tell you this. If you recall, you know, the president, when it came to making his announcement about the troop withdrawal from Iraq, his opening line was, "I have kept my campaign promise." National security cannot be based upon campaign promises. General Austin, who was the commanding general in Iraq at the time, asked for 10 to 15,000 of a residual force. He was then told it'd be 3 to 5,000. Next thing you know, he was told it'd be 0. So now we left a vacuum in Iraq, and guess who is in Syria now? The Iranian Revolutionary Guard. Because the al-Maliki, being Shia, is very, you know, pretty much so a puppet now of Iran, so they were able to transit through. So, you know, again, this is the short-sightedness of our foreign policy and national security policy, which promoted what has exactly happened in Syria, because Iran is extending their regional hegemonic dominance. Now, you got to be very careful about what's happening in Syria, because on one side you have Bashar al-Assad, you have Iran, and you have Russia. There's no doubt about it. They're supplying weapons. Now, on the other side, you do have freedom fighters. Do we really know who they are, their intents? Do we know their structure? You know, as the gentleman asked them yesterday, what is the strongest political group in Syria? Because that's the key question. The next thing is you have al-Qaeda that is operating there, and you also have Turkey that is seeking to become the next, you know, Islamic hegemon, you know, the return, the restoration of the Ottoman Empire. So whose side do you come in on? That's the question you have to ask yourself. And then understand, once again, they respect strength and might. If you don't have a credible military threat, a credible military presence, you're not going to be able to get their attention. My biggest concern is that we get involved in Syria, and it starts to resemble 1983 in Lebanon, where we didn't have a clear and cut goals and objectives, a clear cut end state, and we did not give our men and women, primarily the Marines, the right type of rules of engagement. And the next thing you know, while they're asleep in their barracks, a truck bomb goes right through because they were not allowed to have a magazine in the well of their M16s, and the terrorists saw that. So, you know, again, what is going to be the end state there? What is a new free Syria going to look like? I do not want to